The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty yard of the Mercy Home for Children. When Jonas McCready first saw the boy tied to the fence, the sight hit him like a physical blow, stopping him mid-stride as he approached the orphanage's main gate. A child, no more than 10 years old, hung limply against the wooden posts, his small wrists bound with rough rope that had clearly been there for hours. Jonas was a man of few words, a weathered rancher in his 50s who had come to the orphanage on business. He needed help with the harvest on his spread outside of Willow Creek, Texas, and the orphanage sometimes provided older boys willing to work for fair wages. But the scene before him changed everything about why he was there. The boy's clothes were torn and dirty, his face streaked with dried tears and dust. But it was his eyes that haunted Jonas, eyes too old and too knowing for such a young face. They held the kind of pain that Jonas recognized from his own childhood, the look of someone who had learned not to expect kindness from the world. Without hesitation, Jonas pulled out his pocket knife and cut the ropes that bound the child to the fence. The boy collapsed into his arms, too weak to stand after what had clearly been a night of torment. Subscribe to our channel to follow this powerful story of rescue and redemption, and see how one man's silence spoke louder than any words could. "What's your name, son?" Jonas asked quietly, lifting the boy with gentle hands despite his own considerable size and strength. "Timothy." The boy whispered, his voice hoarse from crying and calling for help that hadn't come. "Timothy Walsh." Jonas carried Timothy toward the orphanage building, his jaw set with a fury that anyone who knew him would have recognized as dangerous. The Mercy Home for Children was run by Edgar Grimsby, a man who had a reputation for strict discipline, but who collected donations from the community. By presenting himself as a caring guardian of unfortunate children, the front door opened before Jonas could knock, revealing Grimsby himself, a thin man with cold eyes and a smile that never reached them. "Mr. McCready," Grimsby said with false warmth, "I wasn't expecting you until later today." "Found this boy tied to your fence," Jonas said simply, his voice carrying the kind of quiet menace that made smart men step carefully. "Been there all night by the look of it." Grimsby's smile faltered slightly. "Ah yes, Timothy. He's been having discipline problems, refusing to follow rules, disrupting the other children. Sometimes harsh measures are necessary to maintain order." Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to see how Jonas responds to this cruelty and witness a confrontation that will change multiple lives forever. Jonas looked down at Timothy, who was trembling in his arms, then back at Grimsby, his silence stretched long enough to make the orphanage director visibly uncomfortable. "Of course," Grimsby continued, his voice gaining a defensive edge, "we do what we must to prepare these children for the harsh realities of life. Timothy will learn to appreciate discipline, and he'll be stronger for it." Still, Jonas said nothing, but his actions spoke volumes as he turned and carried Timothy toward his wagon without a backward glance. "Mr. McCready," Grimsby called after him, panic creeping into his voice, "you can't just take one of our children. There are procedures, paperwork, legal requirements." Jonas stopped and turned back, his eyes meeting Grimsby's with a look that made the smaller man take an involuntary step backward. "This boy's coming with me," Jonas said quietly. "You got a problem with that, you can take it up with Sheriff Morrison." The mention of the sheriff clearly worried Grimsby, who knew that his methods might not stand up to official scrutiny. "But the boy belongs to the orphanage. He's our responsibility." "Your responsibility." Jonas's voice was still quiet, but there was steel beneath the calm surface. "Is that what you call tying a child to a fence like an animal?" Make sure to subscribe to our channel to discover how this confrontation escalates and see the incredible decision that Jonas makes next. Timothy clung to Jonas's shirt as the big rancher helped him into the wagon, his small body still shaking from exhaustion and fear. Jonas noticed the rope burns on the boy's wrists, the bruises that spoke of rougher treatment than just being tied up. "Please don't take me back there," Timothy whispered, his voice barely audible. "Please, mister, I'll work hard. I'll do anything you want. Just don't make me go back." Jonas felt something twist in his chest, a protective instinct he hadn't experienced since his own son had died of fever 10 years ago. "You're not going back there, boy," he said firmly. Not ever. Grimsby had followed them to the wagon, his desperation now obvious. Mr. Macready, I understand your concern, but you don't know this boy's history. He's difficult, disruptive. He's been returned by 3 families already because he's impossible to manage. That's so? Jonas asked, looking down at Timothy's small, frightened face. He saw not a difficult child, but a scared boy who had learned to expect cruelty from the adults who were supposed to protect him. The boy needs structure, discipline, Grimsby insisted. He needs to learn his place in the world. Jonas climbed into the wagon beside Timothy, gathering the reins in his work-hardened hands. Seems to me what this boy needs is someone to treat him like he matters, he said, his voice carrying across the orphanage yard. Someone to show him that not all grown folks are bullies and cowards. Remember to subscribe to our channel to see how Jonas's quiet courage sets the stage for an incredible transformation that will amaze you. As the wagon rolled away from the Mercy Home for Children, Timothy sat silent beside Jonas, afraid to believe that his nightmare might actually be over. He'd been at the orphanage for 2 years, ever since his parents had died in a house fire, and every day had been a struggle for survival against Grimsby's cruel regime. Where are we going? Timothy finally asked as they reached the outskirts of Willow Creek. My ranch, Jonas replied simply. Got work that needs doing, and you look like you could use some honest food and a place to sleep, where nobody's going to tie you to anything. Timothy studied the big man beside him, noting the gentle way Jonas handled the horses, the careful way he drove the wagon to avoid jostling Timothy's bruised body. Why did you help me? You don't even know me. Jonas was quiet for a long moment, as was his way. When he finally spoke, his words were simple but weighted with meaning. Every child deserves to be treated with kindness, Timothy, and every man's got a duty to protect those who can't protect themselves. The ranch house that came into view as they crested a small hill was modest but well-maintained, surrounded by neat fences and healthy-looking cattle. It looked like a place where care and attention had been lavished not for show, but because someone took pride in doing things right. This is home, Jonas said as he helped Timothy down from the wagon. For as long as you need it to be. And for the first time in 2 years, Timothy Walsh began to believe that maybe, just maybe, there were still good people in the world. 3 weeks had passed since Jonas Macready had carried Timothy Walsh away from the Mercy Home for Children, and the transformation in the boy was nothing short of remarkable. The hollow-eyed, frightened child who had been tied to that fence was slowly giving way to someone who was beginning to remember what it felt like to be safe. Timothy sat on the front porch of the ranch house, carefully mending a bridle under Jonas's patient instruction. His small hands, which had once shaken with fear and hunger, now worked with growing confidence as he learned the skills that would make him a valuable part of the ranch operation. That's good work, Jonas said quietly, examining the boy's careful stitching. Keep that up, and you'll be better at leather work than most men twice your age. Timothy glowed under the praise, still amazed that an adult could speak to him without criticism or threat. In the 3 weeks since arriving at the ranch, he had never once been struck, shouted at, or punished for the small mistakes that came with learning new skills. Subscribe to our channel to follow Timothy's incredible transformation and see how kindness and patience can heal even the deepest wounds. The ranch had become a place of healing for Timothy, but Jonas was careful not to push too hard or too fast. He'd seen enough broken horses to know that trust had to be earned slowly, with consistency and gentle persistence rather than force. Jonas, Timothy said one evening as they sat by the fire after a day of working cattle. Why don't you ever yell, even when I mess things up? Jonas considered the question while whittling a small wooden horse, a skill Timothy had been watching with fascination for days. Yelling doesn't teach anybody anything useful, he said finally. Just teaches them to be afraid, and afraid people can't learn properly. Mr. Grimsby used to say that children needed to be broken like horses, Timothy said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of painful memories. Mr. Grimsby was a fool, Jonas replied, his tone still gentle but carrying unmistakable conviction. Good horsemen don't break horses, Timothy. They earn their trust and teach them to be partners. Same principle applies to raising children. Timothy was quiet for a moment, processing this radical departure from everything he'd been taught about the relationship between adults and children. Is that what you're doing with me? Teaching me to be your partner? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to see how this conversation deepens the bond between man and boy and sets the stage for an incredible act of courage. Jonas looked up from his whittling to meet Timothy's eyes. That's exactly what I'm doing, son. You're not my property or my burden. You're my partner, and partners look out for each other. The word son hung in the air between them, and Timothy felt something warm and unfamiliar spreading through his chest. No one had called him son since his parents died, and hearing it from Jonas felt like coming home after a long, terrible journey. What if someone comes to take me back? Timothy asked, voicing the fear that haunted his dreams. What if they make me go back to the orphanage? Jonas set down his whittling and turned to face Timothy directly. Boy, I need you to listen to me very carefully. As long as I'm breathing, nobody's taking you anywhere you don't want to go. That's a promise. And I don't make promises I can't keep. The fierce protectiveness in Jonas's voice left no room for doubt, and Timothy felt a security he hadn't known since before his parents' death. But their peaceful existence was about to be tested in a way neither of them expected. The next morning brought visitors to the ranch in the form of Sheriff Morrison and Edgar Grimsby, both wearing expressions that suggested this wasn't a social call. Make sure to subscribe to our channel to discover how Jonas handles this confrontation and witness the incredible stand he takes for Timothy's future. Morning, Jonas, Sheriff Morrison said as he dismounted from his horse. I'm afraid I'm here on official business. Jonas stepped onto the porch, positioning himself protectively in front of Timothy while maintaining the calm demeanor that had served him well throughout his life. Sheriff Grimsby, Mr. McCready, Grimsby said with barely concealed anger, you have illegally removed a ward of the state from my institution. I demand that you return Timothy Walsh immediately. The boy says different, Jonas replied quietly. Says you tied him to a fence all night as punishment. That true? Sheriff Morrison looked uncomfortable, clearly not having been told this particular detail. Edgar, is that accusation accurate? The boy is a chronic liar and troublemaker, Grimsby said quickly. He was disciplined according to accepted methods for dealing with difficult children. Accepted by who? Jonas asked, his voice still calm, but carrying an edge that made both visitors take notice. Timothy had been listening from inside the house, but now he stepped onto the porch beside Jonas, his small hand reaching for the big rancher's arm. I'm not lying, he said, his voice stronger than it had been in years. He tied me to the fence because I tried to stop him from hitting little Mary Henderson with his belt. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to see how Timothy's courage to speak the truth changes everything and leads to an incredible revelation. Sheriff Morrison's expression darkened as he processed this information. Edgar, we've had this conversation before about your methods. If you're using physical punishment that leaves marks or endangers the children. Now hold on. Sheriff, Grimsby protested. These children come from the worst circumstances. They need firm discipline to prepare them for the realities of life. They need care and guidance. Jonas said simply, they need adults who protect them, not adults who hurt them. Timothy looked up at Jonas with something approaching worship in his eyes. Never in his life had he seen an adult stand up for children against another adult's authority. Sheriff Morrison removed his hat and ran a hand through his graying hair. Jonas, legally speaking, the boy is supposed to be in the orphanage's custody. But if there's evidence of abuse, Sheriff, Timothy said, his voice gaining strength with each word, there are other children still there. They're all afraid of Mr. Grimsby, and some of them have marks from his belt and his fists. The sheriff's face hardened as he looked at Grimsby. Edgar, I think it's time we had a thorough inspection of your facility, and until that inspection is complete, I'm declaring Timothy here to be in protective custody with Jonas. Remember to subscribe to our channel to see the incredible conclusion of this confrontation and discover how one man's quiet courage saved more than just one boy. 6 months after Sheriff Morrison's investigation had shut down the Mercy Home for Children and sent Edgar Grimsby to territorial prison, the McCready Ranch had become something Jonas had never expected, a real home filled with the laughter and energy of children who were learning to trust again. Timothy Walsh, now legally adopted as Timothy McCready, stood on the front porch watching as two more children played in the yard. Sarah Henderson, the little girl Timothy had tried to protect that night he was tied to the fence, was now a bright 7-year-old who followed Timothy everywhere like an adoring little sister. And Marcus Thompson, a quiet 12-year-old who had been at the orphanage for 3 years, was slowly coming out of his shell under Jonas's patient guidance. "Pa," Timothy called out, the words still feeling wonderful in his mouth. After months of practice, Mrs. Henderson from town is coming up the road with another wagon. Jonas emerged from the barn where he'd been teaching Marcus the finer points of horse care and smiled at the sight of their weekly visitor, Mrs. Henderson. Sarah's aunt, who had taken custody of the girl after the orphanage closure, had become a regular presence at the ranch, often bringing supplies and news from town. Subscribe to our channel to follow the heartwarming conclusion of this incredible story and see how one act of kindness created a family that chose each other. Jonas. Mrs. Henderson called out as her wagon pulled into the yard, "I've brought someone who's been asking to meet the man who saved our children." Behind Mrs. Henderson sat a distinguished-looking gentleman in a fine suit, someone who clearly wasn't from the frontier communities of Texas. He stepped down from the wagon with the careful movements of a man more accustomed to city streets than ranch yards. "Mr. McCready," the stranger said, extending his hand. "My name is Judge William Harrison from the Territorial Court in Austin. I've heard remarkable things about what you've accomplished here." Jonas shook the judge's hand with his typical understated manner. "Just doing what needed doing, Judge. Nothing remarkable about treating children with kindness." "On the contrary," Judge Harrison replied, "what you've done here has caught the attention of people throughout the territory. The way you've taken in these children, the home you've created for them. It's exactly the kind of example we need to see more of." Timothy moved to stand beside Jonas, his hand automatically reaching for his adoptive father's arm in a gesture that had become natural to both of them. The boy, who had once flinched from any adult contact, now sought out Jonas's reassuring presence with complete trust. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to see what incredible proposal Judge Harrison has brought and how it will change the lives of countless children across the frontier. "Judge," Jonas said carefully, "if you're here to talk about taking these children somewhere else, you're wasting your time. They're my family now, and families stick together." Judge Harrison smiled, clearly having expected this response. "Actually, Mr. McCready, I'm here to talk about expanding what you've built here. The territorial government has been looking for someone to oversee a new program for caring for orphaned and abandoned children across Texas." "What kind of program?" Jonas asked, his protective instincts still on high alert. "One based on your model," the judge explained. "Small family settings instead of large institutions. Care provided by people who understand that children need love and guidance rather than punishment and control." Timothy looked up at Jonas with excitement growing in his eyes. "Pa, that means you could help other kids like us, kids who need someone to care about them." Jonas considered the judge's words while watching his 3 children play in the yard. Sarah was teaching Marcus how to braid rope while Timothy supervised with the authority of someone who had learned the skill first. They looked like what they were, siblings who had found safety and love together. Make sure to subscribe to our channel to discover Jonas's decision and see how his quiet heroism rippled out to change lives across the entire frontier. "Judge," Jonas said finally, "I'm not much for speeches or politics or managing big programs. I'm just a rancher who believes children deserve to be treated right." "That's exactly why you're the right person for this position," Judge Harrison replied. "We don't need someone who talks about caring for children. We need someone who actually does it day after day with patience and consistency." Mrs. Henderson spoke up from where she'd been watching the children play. "Jonas, you've given these 3 a miracle. Think of how many other children you could help find families like yours." Jonas looked down at Timothy, who was gazing up at him with complete faith that whatever his adoptive father decided would be the right choice. What would it mean, practically speaking? It would mean identifying and training people throughout the territory who could provide homes like this one, Judge Harrison explained. It would mean ensuring that no child ever again faces the kind of treatment they received at places like Grimsby's orphanage. And it would mean, Timothy added quietly, that no other kid would have to be tied to a fence all night, hoping someone would care enough to cut them loose. The simple words from his son hit Jonas like a physical blow, reminding him of that morning 6 months ago when he'd first seen Timothy bound and helpless. Every child deserved to have someone who would cut their ropes and carry them to safety. Remember to subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories from the American frontier that prove how one person's courage and kindness can change the world. All right, Judge, Jonas said after a long moment of consideration, I'll take the job, but I do it my way, with my kids helping me. And anyone who wants to hurt children will answer to me personally. Judge Harrison smiled broadly. Mr. McCready, I wouldn't have it any other way. As the sun set over the McCready ranch that evening, Jonas sat on his front porch watching Timothy help Sarah and Marcus with their evening chores. The boy who had once been tied to a fence in helpless desperation was now a confident young man who used his own painful experiences to help other children feel safe and valued. Pa, Timothy said as he joined Jonas on the porch, are you sure about taking this job? It's going to mean a lot of travel, a lot of time away from the ranch. Jonas put his arm around his son's shoulders, marveling at how natural the gesture had become. Timothy, that morning I found you tied to that fence. I made a choice to help one child who needed it. Tomorrow, we start making that same choice for children all across Texas. Timothy asked, his face lighting up with hope. You think I'm going to do this without my partner? Jonas replied with a rare smile. You know more about what these children need than any adult I've ever met. Besides, who else is going to help me remember that the most important thing isn't what we say to them, but what we do for them? Timothy leaned against his adoptive father's strong shoulder, feeling the same security and love that had been growing since that first day, when Jonas had cut his ropes and carried him to safety. I love you, Pa. I love you too, son, Jonas replied, the words coming easier now after months of practice. And tomorrow, we're going to help a lot more children understand what that feels like. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales from the Old West that celebrate the transformative power of love, courage, and the simple choice to do what's right when no one is watching. In the distance, the lights of Willow Creek twinkled like stars, each one representing a family that had learned about the McCready Ranch and the quiet man who had proved that sometimes the most powerful response to cruelty is simply refusing to participate in it. Jonas McCready had never sought recognition or praise for what he'd done. He had simply seen a child who needed help and provided it, the way any decent person should. But in a world where too many adults had forgotten their duty to protect the innocent, that simple act of cutting a boy's ropes and offering him safety had become the foundation for a movement that would transform how Texas cared for its most vulnerable children. And it all began with a man who believed that every child, no matter how broken or difficult, deserved to be treated with dignity and love.